Hi, everybody. Sorry, I started my live stream late. When I schedule these live streams, I really don't know exactly when I'm going to start, but those timestamps are really tentative. But some of y'all have been telling me that my content is boring, so what I'm going to try to do in the future, I'm going to stop trying to follow the trends and just I'm going to do less content, but it's going to be more compelling content. I think more is less, or less is more. Sorry. Um, I'm going to try to do more substantive content that I think is going to impact the community. And so today we're going to get into this debate, which is actually more of an interview between Bayard Rustin and Malcolm X. If y'all don't know who Bayard Rustin is, he was the mentor of Martin Luther King. I say he was the architect of the civil rights movement because he was leading those bus boycotts before Rosa Parks. He organized the March on Washington. He really was the architect, but he was kept behind the scenes because he was gay. Um, with that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with everything Bayard Rustin did, right? Like Little Kim said, stand behind Martin Luther King, but I'm more like Malcolm X. So yeah, he did some things that did I don't know, it laid the groundwork for us to get civil rights. But at the end of the day, I don't support incrementalism. And that's the reason I've been saying these things since I've been on here. And some of the points that Malcolm X made in this discussion really align with what I agree with. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I think this interview was very overlooked, and we're still talking about reparations. We're talking about DEI, and we're basically begging for crumbs. And I think we need to stop doing it. I think the solution is sovereignty. And y'all can see right now, every time we take two steps forward, we're taking 5 steps back. So this is not a permanent solution. Begging for crumbs, this incrementalist approach is not getting us anywhere. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started because I don't want to bore y'all. I want y'all to hear what Malcolm X had to say.
Here in the WBAI studios are Bayard Rustin, Executive Secretary of the War Resisters League, and Malcolm X, Minister of Mohammed's Temple of Islam in New York. Both of you gentlemen are working in your own ways for the welfare of the American Negro. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is if you would describe the purposes of your individual organizations and tell us something about the philosophies inherent in them. Mr. X.
Yes, sir, Mr. Donald, and I'm happy to be here today to represent the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to your audience. And as you know, Mr. Muhammad is the spiritual head of the fastest growing group of Muslims in the Western Hemisphere. And he perhaps is probably the greatest drawing card among the so-called Negro masses, more so than any other so-called Negro leader today. And proof of which, a year ago in Washington, D.C., he appeared at the Uline Arena and drew 10,000.
Okay, I guess this person already left. I never said Malcolm X was an anarchist. I know he wasn't. And most of y'all don't even know what anarchy means. Anarchy is about getting rid of all hierarchical structures. It's not about not having a government. So all indigenous cultures were anarchists. It's about not having a state, not having anybody ruling over you. It's about cooperation. And even though he was not explicitly anarchist, I don't see how you're so dismissive. We haven't even started this discussion, and you're already telling me he's not an anarchist. I didn't say. Where did I say that he was an anarchist? I said he sounds like an anarchist. The arguments that he made in this discussion align with anarchy, and you haven't even heard it, and you already. I don't know. We're going to keep going because I don't know why there's such a visceral reaction within the Black community to dismiss anarchy when y'all know that statism is not in your favor. And I was going to lay that all out.
and George and cite these things. People, they have to admit that the masses of the so-called Negroes are interested in hearing what he has to say. Probably in the past 2 years, he has become the America's most talked about and most written about black man. And even at the present time, I'd say he's one of the most he's the most controversial topic, namely because he's having such miraculous success in getting his program over among the so-called Negro masses. And if you ask me what it is, I can best tell you what it is by what he is credited with doing. The Time magazine last year, in an article about Mr. Muhammad, pointed out that he has successfully eliminated from among his followers the use of alcohol, which is one of the things that has destroyed our people here in America as a race. He has successfully eliminated dope addiction, profanity, excessive profanity, which actually stems from disrespect of self. He has successfully eliminated stealing and crime among his followers. He has, Time magazine also pointed out that he has, Mr. Muhammad has been successful in eliminating adultery and fornication and prostitution and making the black man respect his woman, something that has been characteristically absent among our men. And Time magazine also pointed out,
as y'all know, he later disavowed Elijah Muhammad because Elijah Muhammad was, in fact, disrespecting black women. He had impregnated, I believe it was, I don't want to make rumors, but allegedly there was an underage girl. Yeah, he was going around fornicating, and so there was a lot of hypocrisy going on with Elijah Muhammad. So Malcolm X later had to separate from that movement and start his own group, and then he was later assassinated. I think it was because of that.
That among the Muslims who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, juvenile delinquency has been eliminated. And in the U.S. News and World Report, about a couple months later in '59, they pointed out that Mr. Muhammad was successful in making the so-called Negroes see the importance of an economic program that would, in fact, when you think of what Time magazine said, they were giving him credit for being probably one of the greatest moral reformers that has appeared among the so-called Negroes here in America yet. And when you tie in what the U.S. News and World Report magazine said concerning his success at getting the so-called Negroes to set up stores and factories and farms to feed ourselves, grow food for ourselves, factories to manufacture things for ourselves, and places of business to create jobs for ourselves. The point behind this particular phase of Mr. Muhammad's program is to make the so-called Negro economically independent, to keep him from having to embarrass the white.
Now, he's going to explain it later why he keeps saying so-called Negro, but the word Negro is a pejorative term because it basically puts us in the status of a resident alien, that this is not our country, and because we're not tied to a homeland, calling us Negro makes us second-class citizens. He's going to explain that later.
Man, by demanding that the white man give him a job, when he can actually, Mr. Muhammad feels that our people can get together and pool our resources and our talents and whatnot and make jobs for ourselves. And lastly, I'd like to say that
you hear that? It's about making jobs for yourself, so we're not dependent on the system. We should not need DEI. What are we, 60 years past the Civil Rights Act and we're still begging for crumbs, begging for DEI and whatever throwbacks they want to give us? No, we should not be begging for DEI at this point. We should be self-sufficient.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching is not what we have been accused of, nationalism. Nationalism, the difference between being a Muslim and a nationalist, nationalism is the political approach or a political solution to the problems that confront the so-called Negroes in America. The aim of the black nationalist is the same as the aim of the Muslim. The Muslim and the black nationalists have no differences in objective. We are pointing toward the same goal, but the difference is in method, method. The black nationalist, wherein he relies on a political solution to the problems that confront the so-called Negro, we as Muslims believe that the only solution to our problem is a religious approach.
And interestingly enough, he later dropped the emphasis on the black Muslim approach, and then he did embrace black nationalism. He basically was trying to bring together everyone within the diaspora, whether they were Muslim or not. So he did become a black nationalist at the end of the day.
And this is why we stress the importance of a moral reformation. As a rule, the black nationalist will not talk to you about God or any religion or any kind of moral uplifting of the moral values. Whereas the Muslim, he stresses first to raise the moral standard of the so-called Negro, and by doing this automatically it tends to give him more dignity and self-respect, and it elevates his thinking to the point where he begins to think in terms of doing something for himself rather than to sit around and beg somebody else to share with him what they have amassed for themselves. So I would like to stress that Mr. Muhammad is not a politician. He doesn't believe that politics is the solution to the so-called Negro's problem. He says that the primary ingredient involved in our solution, it will take God. God himself has to have a hand in it, especially because the problem of the so-called Negro is so unique. His problem is different. The problem of the so-called Negro in America is different, perhaps, than the problem of any black people anywhere on this earth since the beginning of time. And so
I'm sorry for those of you who are leaving. It actually does get more interesting. This is just the introduction. Maybe I could have skipped it, but I thought it was relevant because he's laying the framework for the discussion as it goes into it.
Our entire approach is a religious approach. We believe that every condition that the Negro is in today was preordained, predestined, and prophesied. And we believe that we're living in the fulfillment of that prophecy today. We believe that our being here in America is in terms of biblical prophecy. We believe that the slave master's oppression of us is in line with biblical prophecy. And we believe that all of the trouble that the slave master is having on this earth today, all over the world, is all in line with fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And we also believe that Mr. Muhammad's presence in America in the midst of the so-called Negroes and his reason for teaching what he's teaching exactly as he's teaching it is all in line with the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. So the one thing that I would like to stress is our program is strictly a religious program. Our solution is a religious solution. It's not a political one.
But Mr. X, does this involve the creation of a black state in America?
Yes, well, I answer you like this. It involves the creation of a black state for the black man, if not in America, somewhere on this earth. If not somewhere abroad, then right here in America. But primarily it involves the acquisition of some land that the black man can call his own, here or somewhere else.
Now, I've been saying this. I haven't looked at Malcolm X in a long time, but I guess I forgot that he said this. But this, based on my knowledge of what the social contract is, and the way democracy works, where it's majoritarian, democracy is tyranny. And when I say this stuff, people are saying that I got it wrong. So if I got it wrong, then that means you're saying that Malcolm X got it wrong. And Malcolm X is everybody's hero. Y'all prefer Malcolm X even more than Martin Luther King. So I want somebody to tell me that Malcolm X was wrong.
If the powers that be don't want it here, then they should make it possible for it to be somewhere else. If they don't want it to be somewhere else, they should make it possible for it to be right here.
It does have some political characteristics then.
Any religion, if by politics you mean the freedom and the rights of the black man, Any religion that doesn't take into consideration that particular ingredient that involves the freedom of the black man is the wrong religion. But politics as such is not the solution. But the divine solution would have to have that particular ingredient in it. You can call it politics if you want, but I wouldn't call bread salt. It has salt in it. Salt is one of the ingredients. Yeast is one of the ingredients. Flour is one of the ingredients. And the overall problem of the so-called Negro in America is not a political problem as such. It's an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's a mental problem. It's a moral problem. And it's a spiritual problem. So we need a solution that doesn't deal with politics alone. What good does it do a man to be politically free and at the same time be economically dependent upon the man who gave him the so-called political independence? Why, he's still a slave. So we feel that since all of these ingredients are involved, only God himself can give a solution that will solve the whole thing. And this is the solution that we feel the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is teaching among the so-called Negroes here in America.
Mr. Rustin.
I agree with that, but at the same time, just because you have sovereignty doesn't give you full independence, because even those African countries that are so-called sovereign, they're still beholden to the centralized banking system, which keeps them in debt. And then America keeps talking about how we're so prosperous, we're so wealthy. It's because of the exploitative exchange rate. So we get to take all of their raw materials, all of their natural resources for paper money. We're getting viable commodities, and all they're getting is some worthless monopoly money. So really full sovereignty would be getting out of this centralized banking system, which keeps those African countries in debt, in perpetual debt. He goes into so many details that I just really wanted to cover today.
We hear from you.
I am very happy to be here, and particularly anxious that Malcolm X and I should clarify some of these questions which he has brought up in my mind. I would like to state very simply what it is that I believe and feel. I believe that the great majority of the Negro...
No, we're not already free. We're not already free at all. If we were free, people wouldn't be begging for DEI. We wouldn't be complaining about police brutality. I mean, we're not chattel slaves, but we don't control our own. We don't have self-determination. We're still getting harassed by the police. We still have to pay tax. I mean, I don't know. When I talk about this stuff, it gets very few views because it's boring. But I reviewed the whole social contract. We don't actually own our lives. We don't own our real estate, right? The state owns your property, which is why they can destroy your property, and then when you try to sue them, they claim sovereign immunity. So we're not free. We're not independent. We're not self-sufficient. We're still relying on crumbs. And I don't know how this is going to be taken by, people. It is what it is. I don't know how anybody can argue that we're free. We're not. It's much better than it was back in the day, but economically we're not free. We're still dependent. We're not even free politically. We're still beholden to an oppressive system. I don't feel free at all. I feel very oppressed, which is why I am an anti-natalist. That's primarily the reason. I feel that by procreating, all you're doing is putting people into this oppressive system. Maybe I would not be so gung-ho against procreation if we actually had liberation. But yeah, I just can't. I can't justify it under this oppressive system.
People, the black people in this country, are not seeking anything from anyone. They are seeking to become full-fledged citizens. Their ancestors have toiled in this country and contributed greatly to it. The United States belongs to no particular people because of race, color, or creed. People have come from many parts of the world to construct.
And I want y'all to know, because a lot of people are saying that Bayard Rustin was a coon. He sold out. And when I say Bayard Rustin, I'm using Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King interchangeably, because Bayard Rustin was Martin Luther King's mentor. Bayard Rustin was to Martin Luther King what Elijah Muhammad was to Malcolm X. So Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King are on the same team. People are saying Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin both sold out. But at the end of the day, they represent what the majority of the Black community wants. They want to be full-fledged citizens. They want to be law-abiding citizens who are integrated and accepted by the majority. That's what they want. They don't want to be self-sufficient. They don't, and he's going to, I mean, y'all are going to sit up here and say that Bayard Rustin was cooning, but he represents what the majority of Black Americans want. Everything that he said is completely in alignment with Black Americans today.
And it is my view that the great majority of Negroes take as their key word, and the great number of Negro leaders, the term integrate, which means that rightly or wrongly, they choose to become an integral part of the United States. I believe that we should work politically to the...
But that's what they want. They want the American dream. They want the big house, the car. They want access to women of the dominant society. That's what they want. They don't want to struggle. They don't want to have they don't want to liberate their own children. You can see by what they spend their time invested in, and who we measure, who do we hold up as the success, right? We hold up those who have money, right? Those who are broke, you're basically nothing. I mean, I guess you would say Malcolm X was nothing, because Malcolm X wasn't wealthy. It's not about your values, your ethics. It's none of that. It's all about materialism.
I agree that that is possible, but I also believe that, and through the courts, but I believe that at the moment we have reached that point where the justice and freedom for the Negro people will come about largely because they, with a sense of dignity and pride, organize themselves to demand to become an integral part of all the institutions.
But that's what they want. That's exactly what they want. They want a Black president. They want to get Blacks on the Supreme Court. They want Black CEOs. And as long as they get that, they are placated. They don't care about... So you get a few token people up there, and that's all that matters. You get Oprah, you get Obama. The manner in which the everyday American Black person lives in America is of no moment, right? And again, y'all, I'm writing this book about homophobia, and that book is really going to get into the performative masculinity within the Black community. But a lot of everything within the Black community is performative, right? You have an image of successful Black people, and then that's supposed to be performative. It's supposed to be representative of us as a whole. You get a few token Black lawyers, and then the fact that the majority of Black people are still in poverty, it's supposed to just be overlooked because we made it. We overcame because we got some few at the top. By the way, they're not even pulling anybody up. What they're doing is getting to the top and then pulling the ladder up behind them, right? And then we're supposed to, the okie doke is that we're supposed to support Black businesses, right? Just because you say your business is Black. And I'm not against that, but if you are going to have a Black business, if you're going to use that as your selling point, you can at least get your wealth to help other Black people. But that's not what they're doing. It's all about hoarding wealth for themselves, not giving back to the community. Every time I get some money, my first instinct is not to go buy some Jordans or my first instinct is, how can I help people, right? I'm not even going to talk about my own personal. I just got some money, and I'm trying to figure out a way how I can help the most people possible with the limited resources that I have. But that is not the way most people think.
And thus, such things as the Montgomery protest, the student sit-in movement, and the effort which some of us are now making in regard to elections, where we do not honestly feel that either of the major political parties can solve the problem as they are now constructed. We are doing those things by direct action which we feel will splinter the existing political parties, cause a political realignment in which the freedom and justice for all people, including Negroes, can be achieved. Now, this is not a unique position, and certainly, while a controversial one, not so controversial as that which Malcolm X puts before us. And I should like, therefore, to ask him this question. It would seem to me that the logic of your position really is to say to Negroes, or black people in this country, we ought to migrate and set up somewhere in Africa a state in which men are free to follow a particular religious ideal, because it seems to me ultimately this is where you have to come out. I don't see how this escapes as being the logic of your position. You say that.
Now, what Bayard Rustin is doing right now is pure propaganda, because it's not what Malcolm X said. Repatriating to Africa is on the table, but what he's saying is that we could actually have land within the United States that is sovereign. And then Bayard Rustin completely sidesteps that in saying that we're going to Africa. No, that's not what I mean, that's included within that discussion, but that's not what he's saying.
Perhaps a state will be set up here, but on the other hand, your attitude is if you're not wanted, then you don't want to be where you're not wanted. So why isn't the logic of your position to go to the heart of the matter and take the Garvey position and urge Negroes to return to Africa?
Well, Mr. Rustin, number one, when you speak of us striving here to become full-fledged citizens, or as they say, first-class citizens, number one, most of the Negro leaders, or so-called Negro leaders, they have gotten the Negro masses to think in terms of second-class citizenship, which there is no such thing. We who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad look upon a man as either a citizen or he's not a citizen. He's not a citizen by degrees. He's a citizen or he's not a citizen. And as long as the black man in America is not recognized as a first-class citizen, we don't feel that we are citizens at all. No other.
You hear that? If you're still begging for DEI, you're still fighting against police brutality, then you're just not a citizen. You are a resident alien.
Other people in America are placed in a second-class citizenship category. People can come here from Hungary, which is a communist country, and be incorporated or integrated into the American way of life overnight. They don't have to come in as third class, second class, or some other kind of class citizen. The only man that's...
And I do want to reiterate on this, because when they come in, they're automatically American, right? But when we've been here far longer than most of those immigrants, even the European immigrants, right? We're still hyphenated. We're still called African American. Why? Because they don't want to call us black, or not even that they don't want to call us. We don't want to call ourselves black. Black is a pejorative. So we want to call ourselves African American. No, we're black. That is our, well, what is the technical term is Negroid, right? But it means black. And then we're American. That is our nationality. We're not African American. Stop calling yourselves that.
Placed in this category is this so-called Negro who has sat around and begged the white man to accept him.
It's not our land. I know it should be because we built it, but it's not. That's not the way democracy works. It's majoritarian. They're the majority. And so because they are the majority, it's theirs. we're second-class citizens. We're put at the bottom even under immigrants who just came here. Even I don't want to get too specific because I don't y'all know where I'm going with this. Anybody who just came here, they're going to be put before us. Even someone who just hopped over the border yesterday. All they have to do is they don't even have to learn the language. I want y'all to let that sink in. We had to learn the language. We had to give up our religions. We had to completely adopt their way of life. And they don't even have to do that. They can just come over and we have to learn their language. So that should tell you something. This is not our go tell FBA what? Go tell FBA what? Okay, I guess I'm addressing them too. I don't give a shit. They can get the smoke too. I don't give a shit. Foundational Black Americans, okay. You're full of shit. And I don't know exactly what they're saying. As far as I know, FBA was co-opted from ADOS. I don't know what I don't have a response for that. At the end of the day, if they're begging for reparations, then they're part of the problem. Foundational Black American okay, I think that's bullshit. I think I told y'all before about idealism versus realism. I think that FBA is aspirational. It is idealist, but it's not realistic. It's not. And I know I keep commenting, but maybe I need to stop commenting because I want y'all to hear what Malcolm X had to say because he breaks all this stuff down.
As an integral part of his particular political setup and whatnot. Now, we feel that if after 100 years since Lincoln issued the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, if the black man here is still not recognized as a first-class citizen, which...
By the way, Abraham Lincoln never supported integration. Abraham Lincoln wanted us to have our own land. He wanted us to repatriate and have sovereignty. He believed that we would actually be happier under self-determination as opposed to living under the thumb of this oppressive system. People say that it's because he was racist. It wasn't because he was racist. He thought that that was in our best interest, that we were not the same, that if we could not thrive under their way of life, under capitalism, and we're not thriving, right? We have the few tokens who are the exception, but the majority of us are not thriving. And I know y'all can point to examples of like municipalities that are run by blacks and they're not, they're corrupt, they're rife with corruption and oppression. But I think you have to start from the root, right? You gotta grow this from scratch. And if you start out with people who are already degenerate because they grew up in this oppressive system, then you're going to get degenerate politicians. So I don't know. I mean, you have to re-educate these people. You can't just give them freedom and sovereignty and think you're going to get a different result. Like, one of the things I want to say before I keep going is that if we ever do get sovereignty, the first thing we have to do is push out the problems within the community. Everybody cannot be invited to the cookout. There are some people who cannot come to the table because they are problematic. So, yeah, they're holding the community back.
Means free. Then we don't feel that what Lincoln did actually set the so-called Negro free in the first place. Not freedom in its full sense of the word. An example. If you have a unique problem in that if the black man in Nigeria, for instance, strives against his oppressor to gain his freedom, once he gains that freedom, the oppressor leaves. But the black man in Nigeria is already at home. He has his own country. If the black man in India...
Okay, for the person who said that we already have freedom, why? I mean, I've made a whole video about this, about how we don't have freedom, and that video got very few views. But we don't even have the right to die, right? If you don't have the right to die, that means you don't own your own life because the state owns your life. You can't own private property, not in a real sense. You're not free. I mean, there's an illusion of freedom. We're told that we get to drive cars. We can go buy a whole bunch of consumer goods. You're not free. The government can snatch you up and literally take your life, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. They're going to claim qualified immunity, and they're going to get off the hook. So you're not free.
Is striving against his oppressor for freedom. Once his oppressor, the colonizer, gives him that freedom, the colonizer leaves, the oppressor leaves, but the slave or the ex-slave is already at home. This is the...
Now, this is all well and good, but you are not answering my question.
I'm answering your question.
Right, go ahead.
If the black man in Kenya, the same way, if he rebels against the British, his British oppressor, and gains his freedom, then the oppressor leaves. Now, the black man in America's position is unique in that he begs for freedom or demands for freedom, but once he gets this so-called freedom, he's still 9,000 miles away from that which he can call home. So he has a problem that's different than the problems of the other dark people all over this earth who have been striving for freedom.
The Haitians are not free either, even though they have so-called sovereignty. They're on their own home turf, and yet the international community has decided to impose sanctions on them because they fought for their own liberation and they overthrew the French. So now they have this blood libel that's been put on them that they're savages. So they don't deserve. I mean, we keep acting like we're giving foreign aid to them, like we're being charitable. No, you have stolen their wealth. You have economically enslaved them, and then you're going to give them some paper money and then act like you're doing something noble. You're not. And then we want to call Haiti a shithole country after we made it a shithole.
And where over there they can use the passive approach, which is sit down or sit in or rebel in that way. When you have in India, like Gandhi, where they had 300 or 400 million black people striving against a couple 100,000 white oppressors, then passiveness worked, because all they had to do is stop, sit down. It's like an elephant sitting on a mouse or something. But here they are the majority and the oppressor is the minority. Here in America, you got the black man is the minority. And when you call yourself sitting down on the white man, all he has to do is let you sit. He can get someone else to run his factory or whatever else he wants to do. But to sit there and use this so-called passive approach, we don't think it will work, because we don't find any parallel. We don't find, for instance...
I know some of y'all may not see the parallel between what he's saying right now and anarchy, but that's only because I've studied anarchy. If you listen to Emma Goodman, she explained that democracy only benefits the majority, that if you're a minority, then it is tyranny. It does not represent your interests at all. So having a sit-in, trying to protest and all that stuff, it doesn't matter. And he's actually going to explain an alternative to working within democracy that can actually get the majority to do what you wanted to do. And I've already laid this out also. That's the reason why I'm playing this live stream, because he actually said a lot of things that I already said without me knowing that he said it.
Anyone being encouraged to seek freedom in a passive way other than the so-called Negro here in America. Many of the whites who pose as liberals and act as advisors for Negroes tell them that be passive, be peaceful, turn the other cheek. But these same whites...
All right, let me stop, because in the beginning, they were asked to lay out their religion, their philosophical framework, and Malcolm X laid out his philosophical framework. But I don't think Bayard Rustin really did that. Bayard Rustin should have explained his whole upbringing, his philosophical underpinnings. Bayard Rustin, I believe he was adopted by a white family. He was raised as a Quaker. if y'all don't know who Quakers are, Quakers were basically a bunch of German immigrants. The Quakers were against slavery and Jim Crow. And so Bayard Rustin, I don't know, I guess he grew up kind of privileged in a way, but then he kind of stepped into the world where he still was a black man. So Bayard Rustin was an idealist. He did not really, even though he was a black man, he was a part of the chain gangs, which he's going to explain. Bayard Rustin was very optimistic, and he had a Pollyanna worldview that we could coexist within the society. And I think Bayard Rustin actually got that wrong. And I think that was because of his upbringing, because of the fact that he was raised as a Quaker.
Who encouraged the so-called Negro to use the passive approach, have never advocated a passive approach to throw off the yoke of bondage to any white groups of people who are in bondage. When they speak of the whites in Eastern Europe who are under the yoke, the Russian yoke, they don't tell them to be passive in their resistance. They feed them ammunition. They feed them guns. They make heroes out of the freedom fighters from Hungary. They make them great heroes. But when it comes to a black man, be he in Asia or Africa or in America, if he becomes militant in his resistance against oppression, then immediately he's classified as a fanatic. But if it's a white man or a white group or someone in a white country that's trying to throw off bondage, the propagandists label that one as a hero, and they label the dark people who are trying to resist this oppression, be it no matter what kind of resistance it is, they label them as fanatics, as racists, as extremists, or as rebels. So what it does, it makes the black man in America who would like to fight for his freedom or take a militant, uncompromising stand, it makes him reluctant or afraid to take that stand for fear that he'll place himself in this particular category. And I would like to say this, also in answer to your question, that it is not the so-called this kind of movement and that kind of movement in America that's causing the white man to give an inch, and that's all he's giving is an inch. It's the pressure that the white man is under today from the outside world. He's not telling you and me that we might be integrated into his particular educational system or economic system 10 years from now. He's not promising it this year, 10 years from now or 20 years from now or even 50 years from now, because he loves us. But he'll tell you every day. You listen to some of these political speeches. They're catering somewhat to you and me, only because they are in a position where they are forced to try and impress and gain the friendship or the sympathy of the African nations that are getting their independence. The white man today is posing as the leader of the so-called free world. And the only way he can be accepted as the leader of the so-called free world is to be accepted by the majority of the peoples on this earth, the majority of whom are non-white people. And they measure him by how he treats the non-white people here in America. And to impress them, he stands up and talks this old integration talk, which is hypocrisy.
Okay, I just want to underscore this point right here, because this is another point that I've made. If you want to get reparations, you don't get it by fighting within this system, right, where you're the minority. You want reparations, or if you want any type of progress, you have to form alliances with the diaspora, right? That's essentially what he's saying. And I made this point, and that video got very few views. I didn't even know that Malcolm X said this. But you have to go to the international community, because the only way you can have sovereignty is through, I told y'all, the whole social contract. Again, this stuff is boring, but the sovereigns only respect other sovereigns. So you can't get it as a subject. You cannot argue for reparations or for anything because you don't have sovereignty. You have to go to the other sovereign African nations, get them together, get them to align with you, and then get them to put pressure on this sovereign, which is the United States of America. And it's, what do you call it? And it states, there's a more specific term, this, gosh, why can't I think of it? It'll come back to me. I'm trying to use the exact term so I don't mislead y'all, but you have to go to the other sovereigns who represent your interests and get them to put pressure on them. Why? Because it is in the sovereign's interest. It is in America's interest to establish trade with these countries. And y'all can see that it is those African countries which put pressure on Israel to stop their damn genocide against the Palestinians. So you can't get it by fighting against the system when you're the damn minority. You can't do that. It doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the way that I'm presenting the information. Maybe I'm not the best speaker. I'm not a great orator. I'm not. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm talking about. And Malcolm X is saying exactly what I said.
Because he's going to integrate you and me, because we'll still be begging 100 years from now. But to impress our brothers in Africa and Asia, and I don't think that he's going to be successful at it.
Now, am I to take it that what you are saying is that you are really opposed to integration because you don't think it's meaningful and cannot work? Therefore, I come back to my question. Now, you said a great deal about nonviolence, which we should get into, and you've implied a certain number of economic things. But I have to get first your basic position clear in my mind. Otherwise, I don't think the rest of the discussion can be meaningful. You have to answer for me clearly the question as to...
Okay, y'all, I just remember what I was the word that I was trying to use are political subdivisions. That's the word I was trying to, or a term that I was trying to think of. So, for some reason, it escaped me. Yeah.
Whether what you ultimately have to see as a logical position is leaving the United States. If for the next 200 years, Negroes are not going to be citizens by your definition, why isn't it logical then for for your leader to say, let us find a piece of territory somewhere and go to it? Because either you are advocating the continuation of slavery, if that isn't logical, because you say you can't get it by the methods which I am advocating, which is the slow, grinding process of integration.
So he's sitting here talking about incrementalism, and that's, unfortunately, that is what the majority of Black people want. They want incrementalism. As long as they get their incremental changes, they're placated, and then they're still going to be crying about DEI 200 years from now. They're not trying to liberate their people. They're not.
Now, I want to know where you stand on that, because I can't see other things clearly unless I see this.
I'll try and make it as clear as I can. If by integration, we believe that integration is hypocrisy. If you were going to use the word brotherhood, that's another thing. We don't believe in integration, but we do believe in brotherhood. Integration...
But do you believe brotherhood is possible here?
If any time, sir, you have to pass a law that will make the white man accept you into his society, that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy. If a man holds a gun on you to make you put your arm around me and pretend that you love me, that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy.
Right.
And if America, if this country has to pass laws to make the white people accept us into their educational system, and has to pass laws to make the white people accept us into their into better housing in their neighborhoods, then what that is, that's the government is holding a gun on the white man and making him pretend that he wants you and me to sit beside him. That is hypocrisy. The government is forcing the white man in America to become a race of hypocrites. Now,
okay, this really underscores the core tenets of anarchy, right? We don't believe in government coercion, right? And in this context, we don't believe in forced integration. We believe in freedom of association, right? So if they wanted to integrate their society voluntarily, fine. But we don't support that. So Malcolm X is saying everything that anarchists believe. We don't believe in holding a gun to somebody's head and forcing them to do what they want. And personally, I believe that if they want to segregate, they should have the right to do that. They absolutely do have the right. And I can say, even as a gay person who lived in a gay community, I did not like it when straight people moved into our neighborhood with their damn kids and then I'm supposed to cater my behavior to the fact that they're straight and they have children. No, I moved into a gay neighborhood because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I think the black community. I don't know. You know what? I don't want to say anything that's going to derail my overall point. I believe in freedom of association. If you want to segregate, you have the right to do that. The same way if you have your own house, if you want to exclude people from your party, right? It's your damn house. You can do that. Um, the only exception I would make would be to public institutions, right? If it's a state funded institution, a school, um, anything that a public park, anything like that, those things can't be segregated. But when it comes to private property, absolutely. But the government seems to have taken a different position on this, mainly because of the fourth. No, it's not the fourth. It's the Interstate Commerce Clause. If y'all don't know, the Civil Rights Act was passed under the Interstate Commerce Clause because um, every time they pass a statute, right, there has to be a constitutional provision within that statute, which is called the Enabling Act. So the Enabling Act and for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the Interstate Commerce Clause because Congress took the position that segregation placed an undue burden on interstate commerce. I told people this before; they didn't believe me. They thought I was making it up. You can go research this, or I could do a separate live stream discussing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and how the Commerce Clause was used to force integration. I could do a whole live stream about that. But for right now, if y'all want to learn more about that, you can just Google the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Interstate Commerce Clause.
If the white man, with no laws passed whatsoever, would accept the black man into his school, would accept the black man into his neighborhood, would accept the black man into his social system, economic system, and political system without laws having to be passed, then we would go for that.
And the problem is that education did not used to be a public, it didn't used to be an issue of the public sphere. Like education used to be a private matter, but but now that education is publicly funded, then it becomes an issue of state action. Now, because it is funded by the state, you can't segregate. I believe that any institution that is purely publicly funded should have the right to segregate. And that applies to anyone. That applies whether you're black, whether you're a woman, whether you're white. It doesn't matter. It's the public institutions because that is state action.
We would say that that's brotherhood, that's voluntarily,
Do you
and
think
it
that's
will work.
going to happen?
Why, your common sense tells you, sir, that it's not going to happen.
Then, if you cannot do this through the constitutional methods of going into courts, of having laws, which
I'm sorry to keep stopping, but the courts are where change happens. The judiciary is the one branch of government in which everyday citizens have direct contact with the state. The legislature and the executive, you really don't have access to them. You can write your letters, which I routinely do, but a lot of times they're unresponsive. And they're putting all these checks on your ability to access the judiciary, right? They have exacted these exorbitant attorney's fees. They have given them an unconstitutional monopoly over the practice of law. They have created these, what do you call it? The vexatious litigant statutes, to where if you are an activist, if you're a private attorney general, which private attorney generals are really prominent within the sovereign community. They basically litigate cases on behalf of the public interest cases. Those people have been routinely kept out of the courts through vexatious litigant statutes. But no, activism is through the courts. But again, when I talk about these legal matters, people think it's boring. They want to tune it out. I'm sorry. I could blow smoke up your ass and just talk about some bullshit just to get views. And I used to do that, but I just got bored doing that because for me, it felt intellectually dishonest for me to just do some bullshit content without trying to be pedagogical. I want y'all to actually get something out of what I'm doing. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out another strategy to make it more entertaining.
Call integration, and if you cannot do it by the spirit which you call brotherhood, then what do you see as the future for black people here, and why should they stay?
Sir, the future for the black man in America, as we've been taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, since you can see, and any intelligent person can see, that the white man is just not going to share his wealth with his ex-slave, or share his house with his ex-slave, or share his fields with his ex-slave, if the slave keeps pressing him. Sooner or later, there has to be a showdown. If the white man, the slave master, does not want the ex-slave in his house, then he has to let that slave go for himself and find a house for himself. Now, Mr. Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our leader and teacher, teaches us this, that God has taught him that the only solution for the slave and the slave master is separation.
Ah, so then you do believe in separation.
We absolutely believe in separation.
Right. Now,
we believe that separation is divine.
Right. Now, if there is to be divine separation, are you people being logical? Are you saying then we ought to take over, let us say, an area of the United States which is predominantly Negro and send more and more in until we control it? Or are you being logical by saying let's get out?
No, I mean, I think Bayard Rustin, man, this is some pure propaganda. We don't need to take over an entire state. We need to have sovereign nations the same way the American Indians got their sovereign territories. It can be within the state. We should be given sovereign land to build our own communities. And this should have been done a long time ago.
Outside of here.
I think both is logical.
Uh-huh.
It's logical when you find that you can't get along with a man in peace to set up house somewhere else. Now, when we say that, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that God has declared that the black man in America must have some land of his own, that means he must have some land of his own. The land doesn't have to be in Asia. The land doesn't have to be in Africa. The land doesn't have to be in Canada. The land can be anywhere. And if right here in America, since, as you say, we've been such good workers and faithful citizens, I'd rather say faithful servants,
right.
We haven't received any payment for our labor. It would only be just if the master, if his intention is good, since he knows he's not going to bring about this integration, the best thing for him to do is let us have some of these states. And we can go into these states, instead of begging him to live next door to him, we can go into these states and set up farms and feed our own people, set up factories and manufacture clothing and other utilities for our own people, set up businesses where we can make jobs for our own people. And this will keep us from having to beg him for that which he has set up for his people.
Right. And I just want to emphasize what you just said, because your oppressor is not the federal government. Your oppressor is the state. It was the state that enforced slavery. It was the state that enforced Jim Crow. It is the state that is killing people on a routine basis, harassing you when you're trying to go to work. It is the state. So even if you got reparations, your money would just go back to the state, and then that state would use your wealth to oppress you. So getting reparations under statism is of no moment. You need to have sovereignty first. That is the first step. And then any money that you get would actually stay within your community and would actually benefit you. But now, if you were to get reparations under your current condition, under your current status, it would go right into the state, and you would be right back in the same position. That money would be gone within not even your life. I mean, it would be gone. I don't know how much money you're talking about in reparations, but it would be gone within 20 years, and you would have nothing to show for it. So that's the reason why I don't support cash reparations. I would support it if we had sovereignty first, but to be a subject under a state, no. It's almost the equivalent to giving let's say you were an actual slave, a chattel slave, and you were to give that slave $100, right? And I've done content on this. What the case law says is that any property owned by a slave is actually owned by his master. And there was a specific legal term for that. Guys, my mind is so all over the place. Oh, it's called the res gestae. That's what it's called. The slave's property is the res gestae of the master. So as a subject, any property you own as a subject of the state, as a citizen, your property is a part of the res gestae of the state. That's the reason why you need to have sovereignty first, because for you to get any type of reparations right now would do absolutely nothing for you.
In other words, then, Daily News is right in describing your movement as being an apartheid movement. They compared you to South Africa, where they say the whites should be in one place, the Negroes in another. It seems to me that what you're saying is pretty much the same thing.
No, sir. We don't feel that the Daily News is qualified to classify us as anything or compare us with any South African philosophy, because number one, the people in South Africa are some people who left Europe and went into Africa, a continent that is not theirs, and took it over from the black people to whom it belonged, and they are now there advocating white supremacy, which is a false doctrine. They're advocating black inferiority, which is another false doctrine, and they're basing their entire governmental system on the continued existence of a country,
And I really want to stop right here to talk about the ways in which Black people actually promote white supremacy. It's not just about promoting Eurocentric beauty standards or anything like that. No, it's about promoting the Anglo way of life. When you get up here and you espouse capitalism, you sit up here and you talk about so and so is broke, so and so they don't have advanced technology, they're primitive. You do all that shit. That's white supremacy. Homophobia is white supremacy. It's a lot of ways that these microaggressions where you sit up here and you espouse white supremacy unwittingly, and you think that you're actually being pro-Black. Why? Because you have embraced the status of a Negro, right? Which is a subject of the state, which is a second-class citizen. And then you actually take pride in this Negro status, that you can elevate yourself up to get some crumbs within the system. Never mind the fact that you're basically just a token who, okay, so let's say you do elevate your status, right? At the end of the day, they're still looking at you as a Negro, and your children are still Negroes. You have not done anything to liberate your people. So maybe you are an Oprah or an Obama, but if, let's say, somebody does not know who you are and you're just mistaken for just being an everyday, then that is your status. So it doesn't matter. You really have to address the whole systemic problem. You can't just think, oh, I got mine, I'm going to pull the ladder up behind me, who gives a shit about whatever. And that's exactly what they're doing, especially these middle-class attorneys. They got theirs, they're pulling the ladder up behind them. They're not even using their legal knowledge and training to try to benefit their community. They're trying to accumulate wealth, climb the corporate ladder, and it's really a shame, because I want to really harp on the fact that it's the attorneys, because that's where legal activism happens. It's through the courts, and they're not using their knowledge for the betterment of the community. In fact, I would say they're even exploiting the community, and then they're turning around bragging about it. I could point to several examples of attorneys doing that. And it's one of the main reasons that I went to law school, so that I could try to fight. Now I've realized that it doesn't matter, because you can't do it in isolation. It really has to be a concerted effort to actually push the community forward. An individual doing that can easily be picked off.
They're staying on a continent that they don't belong in, and also ruling over some people that they have no authority over. We who follow the honorable...
But okay. That's happening in Africa, but it's also happening in America, right? Because one of the things that anarchists, I don't know, one of the tenets of anarchy is the legitimacy of authority, right? Everybody else who came here, they came here as immigrants voluntarily, right? We did not come here voluntarily. We were forced here. We were brought here without our consent. So we did not come here voluntarily, right? And we didn't choose to be born. What is the basis of their authority over us? It's illegitimate, right? You can make the case that everybody who came here voluntarily, that they immigrated here voluntarily, so they should be subject to the laws of America. But if we did not come here voluntarily, then all the laws are illegitimate. Just because they promulgated some laws and say that you're subject to, that does not make it legitimate. It's not legitimate. These bullshit laws should not apply to us because we did not choose to come here.
Elijah Muhammad are advocating peaceful.
Thank you so much for that. Actually, I'm going to write that down, and I'm actually going to look that up. Thank you so much.
Existence here in this country, which we feel is just as much ours as the white man. It's not his because he took it from the Indians, and he can't object to us because he brought us here. We didn't come here on our own. We didn't come here voluntarily. He put us in chains and brought us here, and then worked us for nothing for 310 years without paying us one day's labor. Now, I would like to point this out, Mr. Rustin. If you have 100 people who work for you for nothing for a week, you make a profit. If you have 1 million people who work for you for nothing for a year, you become wealthy. Well, then when you have millions of black people whom you can work for nothing for 310 years, you can easily see why America became the wealthiest and the most powerful country on earth faster than any country in history. But here you have 20 million black people today whose parents were worked for 310 years for nothing. What do they have coming for them? Not only what did.
And it's so amazing how they sit up here and brag about their wealth, how America is so prosperous, even though their wealth was completely stolen. And then they want to tout themselves as Christians. This is a Christian nation, when all their wealth was gotten through raping and pillaging, which, by the way, that is what their version of Christianity was founded upon. It is, I mean, they have a really perverse version of Christianity. It's not real Christianity. You can't be a Christian. You can't be a Capitalist. You can't be a Christian. Well, under their version of Christianity, you can't, but that's not real Christianity. I told you about Gnostic Christianity. They didn't support any of the shit that these so-called Christians in America now support.
Their parents worked 310 years for nothing like an animal, but their parents also were the most faithful soldiers that the master had. What payment have they gotten? And today, they're not asking.
No, I'm not saying that anarchy is about working through the courts. Anarchists believe in direct action. I guess I'm talking about two things at the same time. The best, okay. Let me just clear up so that people don't think that I'm contradicting myself. What I think is the best solution is for us to have sovereign land, right? That we can have self-determination. But within this bullshit democracy statist system, their incrementalist approach is through the courts. So I'm saying two things at the same time. I'm not saying that the courts are corrupt as hell. They don't follow the damn law. The courts are not a guarantee to liberation. But it is the one branch of government that you have direct contact with the state. It is your best shot. But I still maintain that the real solution, the permanent solution, is sovereignty. So I hope that cleared it up.
For much. They're not asking for what someone else would ask. Instead of asking for something that's real, they're asking their master to let them occupy one of the rooms in his house, or one of the rooms with him in his house. Now, this is still not asking for something. If America gave the black man here half of this country, they wouldn't be giving us anything. They work our mothers and fathers for 310 years with no pay. The Senate the Congress and the U.S. Supreme Court found it necessary to appropriate funds to repay billions of dollars to the Indians for land.
Right. And Umar Johnson made this whole video talking about how it is ridiculous for a black person to support anarchy. They don't even understand. And I'm going to get more specific into black anarchy because there's a whole history of that in America. There's this whole notion that only whites can be anarchists, that black people should work within this framework. No, that is not the position of many civil rights leaders. And again, Malcolm X was not explicitly an anarchist, but he didn't reject anarchy either, right? Again, most people don't know what anarchy is. So it's trying to explain that right now, that would take an entire live stream. Like you said, it's a rejection of all hierarchical structures. Horizontal, you can have cooperative. I don't know if y'all realize this, but those African tribes were anarchists. You think that anarchy means that there's no government. That's not what anarchy means. Anarchy is about anti-statism. It's anti-imperialism, anti-religious hierarchy. All of those hierarchical structures have to be abolished.
That was taken from the Indians 300 or 400 years ago. And if this generation of whites will recognize a debt incurred by the former generations of whites to the former generations of Indians, then this same generation of whites also must recognize debts incurred by the former generations of white to you and my forefathers. And if their own courts decree that they should pay the Indian today for what was done to the former generations of Indians, don't you think that God is more just than the court system of America? And if the court system of America says that the Indians must be paid, what do you think God would say that America must do in payment to 20 million black people who worked here for nothing for 310 years?
All right, I take it then that what you're really saying is that you believe that a certain section of the United States should actually be given over, and because Negroes have worked for it and deserve it, and that should be their territory. That this is your solution to the problem.
Only solution is separation.
Separation.
Not integration.
Now that we've got that clear, it seems to me we can go back and build on that for me to raise some other questions with you. Now, how do you see the Negro now? And I'm all in favor, you see, of doing away with dope and alcohol and profanity and the like. This is all to the good. But whether you like it or not, this is no answer to the ultimate problem which you face. Now, given the fact that Moses kept the children of Israel in the desert for 40 years in order to do away with their slave mentality and to build up a new leadership, he also had to know precisely where he was going to take them. He had to have a piece of land. Now, you want a piece of land here. Isn't there some inconsistency with your economic policy then in this regard? Because it seems to me what you are saying is Negroes should own their own stores. Negroes should become independent economically. Now, is this possible where you have Negroes spread over the country the way they are? You want them to buy land in Philadelphia and New York and Texas, and what good is this? What are they going to do? Then give it up and move somewhere else?
It's not impossible because the Native Americans are already doing it. Native Americans already have sovereign territory. Again, it's not about separating from the entire United States. It's about separating from the state, that you can have sovereign land that is autonomous from the state, that has sovereignty, and then your money does not go to the state. And I've done content about this also, those are considered domestic independent nations, right? The state has to respect their sovereignty. They cannot go on their territory without their permission. They can't take their land. They can't tax them. The federal government can tax them, but the state cannot. Right. He's making it seem like it's impossible. It's not. If the Native Americans can do it, then we can do the same thing. But nobody's even talking about this. Nobody's even presenting this as an option. And I think a lot of people would actually respect us more if this is the position we took, because the way they're looking at us is we want to live within their system. We want to beg for DEI. We want to beg for affirmative action. And yet we don't want to be self-sufficient. So they don't take us seriously because they see this as an okie doke, that you're just trying to get a handout. You don't actually want to be liberated. You just want some free stuff. And that's exactly how they see it.
And what is the psychological implications of this?
Well, first, sir, when you mentioned Moses, you mentioned the best example that you probably could have. You pointed out the people that Moses was leading were probably the closest parallel to the problem confronting the so-called Negro in America than any in the Bible. Moses' people were strangers in a land that wasn't theirs. The black man in America is a stranger in a land that's not his. Moses' people had a slave mentality, and when they were...
Okay, y'all heard what he said. You're a stranger in a land that's not yours. You are a resident alien. I don't know why you think... I mean, just because the idealist position is you built this country, this is yours. It's not yours. And they make sure to let you know that it's not yours, because any Johnny-come-lately immigrant can hop over the border and they get preferential treatment over you. So they're telling you that no matter how late in the game they came, they're still going to be put over you. So it doesn't matter. And he's saying that Indians are black. No, they're not. Even a so-called dark-skinned Indian, they're not Negro, right? They may have dark skin, but they're technically Caucasoid. When Ann Coulter made that video saying that Vivek Ramaswamy was an Indian, I wanted to do content, but I got busy. I wanted to explain that Indians, even the so-called dark-skinned Indians, they're not Negroid, they're not black. They're still Caucasians. They're just Caucasians with darker skin. So Ann Coulter and Vivek Ramaswamy are the same race. They're different ethnicities because white is a social construct. She's white and he's what is his, I guess, Indian, but they're still Caucasian. So yeah, Negroid is a very specific race, but then black is a national or ethnicity, excuse me. Black is an ethnicity which is specific to Negroids who were raised in America, who were born in America, right? So we're Negroids, we're so-called Negro, and then Africans, even though they're the same race as us, they're not considered Negro. It's a completely different, they're the same race, but they're not the same ethnicity. I hope that clears it up.
Found they were worshiping gods other than their own. They were worshiping in a religion other than their own. The Negro in America is the same way. He worships the white man's God, and he's following in the white man's religion. The Negro in America is in the same fix, socially, mentally, politically, economically, and spiritually, as the people whom Moses grew up amongst, in so-called in Egypt 4,000 years ago. Now then, if you recall, Moses didn't advocate integration. Moses advocated separation. At nowhere in that Bible can you show me where Moses went to his people and said, believe in the same God that your slave master believes in, or seek to integrate yourself with Pharaoh. Moses' one doctrine was separation. He told Pharaoh, God told me to tell you, let my people go. By go, that meant separate. That did not mean to seek integration in the house of bondage. It did not mean to seek the acceptance of the slave master. It did not mean to seek the friendship even of the slave master. It meant that just what Moses said, let my people go. And then he told his people, if you follow me, I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey. Moses never pointed out to anyone where that land was. God had instructed Moses up to that point. But Moses never told the people where he was taking them or what they would have to go through in order to get there. He said, follow me, and I'll lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey. And if you go back in that Bible, you'll find out some of them believed in him, but most of them were afraid of their slave master. They didn't believe that they could get along without Pharaoh. They didn't believe anybody could give them a job if Pharaoh didn't. They didn't believe anybody could put clothes on their back if Pharaoh. That's a slave mentality. They didn't believe that they could have an economic system free of pharaohs. That's a slave mentality. And today the same problem confronts the so-called Negro here in America, and the same problem confronts the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The same opposition that was put in the path of Moses is put in the path of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad today. If you notice, Pharaoh himself never opposed Moses. He always got magicians to oppose Moses. Today you find your modern slave master. You don't find him opposing the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but he gets Negro, so-called Negro politicians and so-called Negro preachers to work a lot of magic in the eyes of the so-called Negro and make the so-called Negro think that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a crazy man, just like the magicians tried to make the Hebrews think that Moses was a crazy man. They get magicians to do this work. And the magician is the one who goes to the people and tries to make them think, where this man Muhammad is crazy, he's going to get you all out here someplace and get all of you killed. But if you'll recall, and that's why I say I'm so glad that you mentioned that Moses parallel.
Right. So we have all these political necromancers basically trying to exploit the black community, right? They go into the race hustling bullshit. Really, they're only ones getting well. They're profiting off of our oppression, and they don't necessarily care about the advancement of the. We don't really have any real leaders anymore. We don't. We have completely been sold out, and we keep following the same people. So we're chasing our tails. We're not getting anywhere. I mean, the problem is everything in the community is completely performative. So you need to have a leader who's charismatic, who has swag, someone who's a good speaker, someone who is stereotypically masculine, all that stuff. That is important to a lot of people. Someone like me, I may have the right ideas, but I don't have the right image, so I can't do it. Somebody else can do it. I can hand them the ideas and spoon feed it to them, but right, they have the image is more important than the message to a lot of people. So Malcolm X had the right, and that's the reason people are asking me to do content. I don't even know. I'm almost reluctant to do it because Malcolm X had the right image. And if you were to tarnish that image, then to me it takes away from his message. Even though it shouldn't. Yeah, Malcolm X had some questionable behavior, but nobody's perfect. I think they all did. So if you were to learn about his background, then that really should not take away from what he actually did.
We feel that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is the modern Moses. Sometimes they refer to Paul as a modern Moses. I've heard them refer to Reverend Martin Luther King as a modern Moses. But no one can be a modern Moses until they first find out what did the ancient Moses do, and he advocated separation, not integration. He advocated complete separation, not integration, and he didn't advocate passive resistance. He advocated an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What kind of teaching is it when you tell a slave to pray for those who despitefully use you, and it's the slave master who's despitefully using the slave? Love your enemy, and it's the slave master who's an enemy of the slave. As long as you teach a man that kind of philosophy and he eats it up, he'll remain a slave.
Yeah, but you see, I am a great advocate of nonviolence. Now, if you would tell me where it is you're going to lead people, you see, where this land is, I might perhaps say, well, the important thing for me is not to talk about integration or to talk about getting involved in the economic and social and political life in America, because our objective is to get over there. But I don't know where you're going to go, and I don't think you do.
Yes, we do. We can take some land right here, sir.
How?
Right here. It belongs to us.
Yeah, but if you argue that these people are not going to permit you to integrate...
We're not going to integrate.
And if they're not going to be loving enough to accept you, do you think the economic fact is that they're going to give you 10, 12 states that are going to be turned over to Negroes? What states?
Mr. Rustin.
What states?
They don't have to give you an entire state. They just have to give you sovereign territory within the state. I mean, this is not complicated.
predicament that a man is in
Yeah.
is what makes the man reach certain decisions, sometimes against his own will. Maybe you don't realize the predicament that America is in today in this world. America probably is in a more precarious position or predicament than any country has been in since time began.
I agree with that. You don't have to fight that.
Now, what is causing this predicament? It's the race problem.
Yes, I agree
Now,
with that.
who is the primary person involved in this race problem? The so-called Negro.
Right.
America's #1 problem is the so-called Negro. What must we do? This is what Uncle Sam is saying. What must I do about this Negro problem? And whenever she's attacked, whenever America is attacked on the race problem in America, she's completely without anything to say. She can say nothing.
Oh, she can say a lot.
What can she say?
I tell you exactly what
How
she
can she
say.
justify the race
I tell you
problem
just
that
what she
consists
can do.
here?
She doesn't justify it.
What does she do, sir?
She says, and don't misunderstand me, I have spent 25 years of my life, I've been in jail 22 times on the racial question. I've been on the chain gang. But I do not say that her answer is a good one, but it is an answer to meet the situation. She says, up until 1954, we did not have integration of schools. And now we have so many students integrated. Just a minute, let me finish. This is what she says. And she says, Negroes were kept out of trade unions, but now they are being integrated into them. Phil Randolph has set up a new movement for a pressure of the Negro masses on the trade union movement, and things are beginning to give there. America can not justify the race question, but vis-a-vis Africa, Russia, and the others, she's in a very good position to point to a considerable amount of progress, which incidentally I don't happen to think is enough. But it
Again, it sounds like he's Conan right now, but this is the way most black people think. So if he's Conan, then pretty much everybody is Conan.
is enough to keep the great majority of Negroes in a psychological position where I think you would find it extremely difficult to them to talk about going somewhere else. Now, you talk about Mohammed being able to get 10,000 people.
They're not trying to go anywhere else. Even if you put that on the table, they would not leave. Okay. I would say the people who would be more willing to leave would be the ones who are struggling the most, right? The ones who are doing okay economically, those who are in the middle class, they're going to stay. They're just going to stay and struggle and then hope for the best. They're going to keep praying to Jesus so that things will get better. They want incrementalism. But the ones who are at the bottom, yeah, they're probably, but that's the way it's always been. Even in Europe, the people who came to America were at the bottom. A lot of them were prisoners, and they just worked, and they were indentured servants, and they were looking for a better way of life. So it's not going to be the ones who are thriving under this capitalist system. It's going to be the ones who are at the bottom who would be willing to expatriate.
Well, I'm here to tell you that I helped Martin King organize a prayer pilgrimage to Washington in which we got 35,000 people. A youth march in which we got 20,000 people. I simply don't believe that until you have some kind of area where people could go to, that
Rustin,
the United States is going to take this seriously.
Do you realize if I was a Christian in a Christian country,
Yeah.
I wouldn't brag about out of 170 million people getting and in which there are 20 million black people, I wouldn't think it was any accomplishment to get 17,000 or 30,000 to Washington D.C. for a prayer pilgrimage when you got the Washington D.C. itself has got umpteen. Everybody down there is a Christian now.
And yeah, Bayard Rustin is being very dishonest right here, because Malcolm X's marches were almost exclusively black. And then Bayard Rustin's things that he organized with Martin Luther King, those were integrated. So even though he had 30,000 or whatever it was, they were not black. They were integrated. So a significant portion of those people were not black. So he's sitting up here bragging and saying that he was more successful. I guess they're not even on the same page, because Malcolm X is talking about self-sufficiency and self-determination. And then Bayard Rustin is really on integration, and he's this is what capitalists do, right? They go by success. How much money did I raise? How many people did I get to garner support from? And this is a white supremacist talking point. That's exactly what he's doing right here. He's saying I'm more successful because I got more numbers than you, even though I mean it's really just it's almost like if I were to start a movement and then I were to get a whole bunch of immigrants, a bunch of people who can't even speak English, and I say I'm more successful than you, isn't that kind of cheating? Isn't that what the Democrat Party is doing right now, where they're saying, oh, we're just going to get more voters by bringing in immigrants. We don't actually have to win over the American people. We can just import them from foreign countries and then say that we're actually more successful than you. And it doesn't work. We saw right now in that last election that approach did not work. You actually need to create policies which benefit the American people. You can't just import people from third world countries and then keep stagnating the American populace with some regressive policies.
When the reason I said 10,000, sir, when you get like Billy Graham, if he draws 15,000 Christians out to a Christian rally in a Christian country, and then a man comes along who's a Muslim, which is a religion in direct opposition to Christianity, and he draws out a like number, the accomplishments cannot hardly be compared.
Yeah,
and,
but now may I stop you here for a moment,
yeah.
because I think we've got to clarify something. When you say the followers of Muhammad are Mohammedans, Muslims,
not Mohammedan.
Well, Muslim.
Right. So I want y'all to really let this point sink in, because again, Bayard Rustin is pushing some propaganda. He keeps calling the Nation of Islam Mohammedists, because the reason why he's doing that is to say that the members of the Nation of Islam are not real Muslims. This was a talking point which was used heavily during the 60s. They were trying to paint the Nation of Islam as fake Muslims, to say that they were basically, and he's actually going to explicitly say that the Nation of Islam are not real Muslims. They're just basically black extremists or racial supremacists. That's the reason why he's going to keep calling them Mohammedists.
What you are talking about in reality is not a religious following in the terms of what the Muslim would be in India or Pakistan or a Christian in Europe. Because I maintain that the very term Muslim, while in Muhammad's mind it may be a religious concept, it is a psychological and political concept in the minds of the black men in this country who follow it. Most of them do not read the Quran, they read the Bible. Most of them are essentially and culturally Christians. Why, therefore, do they call themselves Muslim? It is because it is a reaction to Christianity, where in fact they to a large extent still practice it, but don't want to use the term because they don't want to use the same religious terminology that their masters use.
Mr. Rustin, I'm surprised at you.
Well, this is a fact. I'm not talking about your leadership.
No,
I'm
sir.
talking about the mass of your followers.
I'm surprised at you. I mean, sir, in this instance, if you were to go to China and find Muslims, or go to India and find Muslims, or go to Sudan and find Muslims,
yeah,
their thinking is different. All of them are Muslims. If you go to the mosque in Khartoum, you will hear the prayers. But after the prayer, the one who calls the prayer or delivers the sermon will deliver a sermon that's unique and will catch the interest of the people in the Sudan.
Yeah, well, how many mosques do you have in Harlem?
Just a moment, sir. But a man who is delivering a sermon in the Sudan, he wouldn't deliver that same sermon in China, because the sermon is delivered to fit the problems of the people in whose country that sermon is given. And it's the same way here in America. In America, you have a unique problem. You have a problem of 20 million black people who have been transplanted, actually uprooted from their native soil and transplanted in soil that's foreign to them. And after being cut off from their culture, for 400 years. When you come to them today with Islam, you are giving them back that which they were taken from 400 years ago.
No, I simply can't agree with this. Historically, most of the Negroes who came from Africa, black people, actually came from the west coast of Africa. It was long after the migrations here that Mohammedanism spread south. It was in the 18th century that the Mohammedanism came down into Nigeria, and to the extent that it...
Y'all notice how he keeps calling it Mohammedanism, even though he already said that that is not the correct term, that they are Muslims? He's doing that on purpose.
Exists in Ghana and Sierra Leone. I think what most of us were when we came here were worshippers of something quite different.
This is what the white man taught you.
Well,
Sir, the white man taught you after bringing you here and stripping you of your original culture, getting it completely out of your mind.
This is just what he did.
He stripped you of your native tongue.
But it was not Mohammedanism.
Just a moment. Well, sir, in Time magazine, February the 16th, 1959, in an article on Sekou Touré, it speaks of the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire was one of the vastest empires in West Africa.
I know about it.
And it says this. It's speaking of the Mali Empire in Guinea. It says, let me find it here for you, sir. It says, though Africa was until the Europeans came the continent that could not write, it had known its times of glory. Guinea was once part of the powerful Mali Empire that stretched from the French Sudan on the upper reaches of the Niger to just short of West Africa's Atlantic coast. When its 14th century ruler, that's a period that predates the discovery of America, Mansa Musa made his pilgrimage to Mecca, he traveled with a caravan of 60,000 men, and among his camels were 80 that each bore 300 pounds of gold. Now, I cite this to say this. This sultan of the Mali Empire, his name was Mansa Musa. Musa is the Arabic pronunciation of Moses. He was a Muslim. He was making the pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, this was the entire Mali Empire. Timbuktu was the capital. Timbuktu was the center of learning. This shows the Muslim influence in that advanced area of West Africa before the discovery of America. Before America was discovered, they say that this man, Mansa Musa, built a swimming pool in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Now, you have to be an engineer, you have to be a genius to build a swimming pool on the seacoast. Yeah. Here's a black sultan, just a moment, sir, who built a swimming pool in the middle of the Sahara Desert. He couldn't have been a savage. If he was that far advanced in engineering to build a swimming pool in the middle of the desert, something the white man can't hardly do today, you can't say that the man's culture...
You're right. Maybe I should address that. The Moors, I mean, if y'all don't know this, the Moors actually were involved in the slave trade. They're the main ones who sold us out in the first place. So I don't know why the Nation of Islam hasn't addressed that. Maybe they're doing that on purpose, but I need to do some research. I don't, at this point, I don't feel qualified to do content on it because I don't know enough about it. But it is a definitive fact that the Moors are the ones who sold us out.
Was a savage culture.
Now look, don't beat a dead horse. I am not for a moment trying to say that there was not vast culture in West Africa.
You said that it wasn't
now, just
Islam.
a moment. I said that the Islam spread from Timbuktu to the west coast of Africa.
Timbuktu is on the west coast of Africa.
Well, it's up in, my dear
Timbuktu.
friend. I'm talking about the area from... Yeah, I know where
Timbuktu is on the west coast of Africa.
And this is the area here that most of the slaves came from, and not Timbuktu.
Sir, this is Guinea down here. Guinea is a Muslim area, and was a Muslim area in that day. I would like to point out one more thing that the same article says. It will not be easy for Africa to be completely itself. It will not be easy. Let's see. In 4 short months, Guinea has apparently learned that independence is a relative thing. It will not be easy for Africa to be completely itself. For no other continent has been so swept by foreign influence. Islam stretches not only across its top, but deep into the south, as far as the lower reaches of the Belgian Congo. Northern Nigeria is as rigidly Muslim as Saudi Arabia, and political meetings in Guinea come to a halt at sunset when everyone troops out, chucks his shoes, and bows toward Mecca.
Now, let me tell you, my friend, just so we get this historically clear in one illustration. All over the west of Africa, you find the finest art objects out of which Picasso and others developed Cubism and modern art. That came from the carving all over West Africa during the 17th and 18th century of figures with faces, hands. If Mohammedanism had really spread, we could not have had those artistic figures because, as you ought to know, the Mohammedans are not permitted to create figures in their art objects.
Sir,
and it was the spread of Mohammedanism later which was in part due to the destruction of these art objects. Now, this is an historical fact, and I think we ought to get on.
No, sir, there's one more point that I think it should be cleared up. When you spoke of the Muslims who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad as not being real Muslims as such, but just using that label to camouflage their continued Christian practices.
I didn't say camouflage. I said that it was a reaction against. I think camouflage is not quite what I mean.
Yes, in the New York Times Sunday, in an article called "Islam is Advancing in West Africa," it says Christians are worried by gains. Lagos, Nigeria. Christian missionaries say they are worried about the advance of Islam in West Africa.
As well they ought to be, because it's spreading very rapidly.
They include Bishop of Lagos, a Nigerian and a Roman Catholic churchman who has been in West Africa for many years. The Catholic cleric said, quote, "Christianity here is skin deep only. Some Africans we baptize now go to the mosque and observe Ramadan, the Muslim month of purification." End quote. A British official of 11 years' service in Nigeria suggested that Christianity was felt to be the white man's religion and was rejected as contrary to the African personality. One more paragraph now. An American who works for a philanthropic foundation here said, "Islam is spreading like wildfire. It offers Africans an uncomplicated creed with a few simple tenets."
Right.
Nigeria has just become independent, already appears well on her way toward becoming a predominantly Muslim nation.
True.
And it's letting you know right here, even the black man in Africa, when he accepts Islam, he doesn't drop all of these other customs overnight. But still he's accepting Islam. He's bearing witness that there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the apostle of Allah, and is giving him unity and militancy that he didn't have before.
All right, all I want to say is that the article points out that these people go both to the Christian and to the mosque.
But it points out that when one is converted to Islam, his reaction to it in Africa is no different than the reaction of the black man here in America. It's both the same reaction.
I wonder if I could ask.
I mean, to me, this whole point is it's a non sequitur. I think Bayard Rustin is only harping on this because he's trying to discredit the Nation of Islam, to say that they're not real Muslims. And again, I want y'all to be aware of the context that during the late 50s and the early 60s, they were trying to portray the Nation of Islam as being racial or black supremacists, and they weren't real Muslims. So that's the only reason why Bayard Rustin is doing this. It doesn't matter which region of Africa they came from. Malcolm X's overall point is solid.
Ask a question here. Mr. Rustin, progress in your terms, does it involve a greater sense of racial identity?
I believe that it is very important to have a great sense of racial identity, because I believe that it is quite impossible for people to struggle creatively if they do not truly believe in themselves. I believe that dignity is first. Now this, for me, is doubly important, precisely because believing in integration and not having been told where we are to go, I can see nothing more logical than staying here and struggling for one's rights.
No, 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 no. I'm not trying to stay here and struggle. I mean, I feel like I don't have a choice, but if I had the option, I would rather start over somewhere where I actually can have freedom and liberation. I don't want to struggle. I think is unproductive for people to continue procreating under this oppressive system. And even if we don't have a specific land to go to, that should be the goal. We should be fighting for that. We should be fighting for land. He's basically saying just because we don't have a specific land that we can point to, then we basically should table this whole conversation. I disagree with that. And the discussion has been tabled pretty much since Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. And now it's moved on to reparations, which is going absolutely nowhere. We should have gotten sovereign land a long time ago. We should not still be fighting for DEI and some bullshit reparations.
Also because of moral principles which I hold, but leave them aside for the moment. I can see no way for the Negro to struggle except through nonviolence and a dedication to strategic nonviolence.
I want y'all to know that Bayard Rustin is the one who brought that whole nonviolence tactic to America. Bayard Rustin went to India and studied under Gandhi, and then he came and brought that to America and taught Martin Luther King about nonviolence as a tactic. Martin Luther King was not nonviolent until he was mentored by Bayard Rustin. So I'm not even saying that what Bayard Rustin did was necessarily good, right? Bayard Rustin, y'all hear him. This is coming from the horse's mouth. This is Bayard Rustin right here. But good or bad, good, bad, or indifferent, the credit should not be given to Martin Luther King. He should not be blamed for the Civil Rights Act. He did not do that. It was Bayard Rustin. All of those tactics came from Bayard Rustin. Martin Luther King gave a speech that somebody else wrote. He did not organize the March on Washington. He was not the architect of the Civil Rights Movement. He was not. He was under, Martin Luther King was under him. His leadership came directly from Bayard Rustin. So if any of your ire should be directed at anyone, it should be at Bayard Rustin, not Martin Luther King.
As in sense a matter of principle. Now therefore, if you are going to be able to struggle with nonviolence to a certain extent, you have to have affection for the people who are mistreating you. No affection for the other fellow is possible without a great sense of dignity in oneself. And therefore, the dignity of the Negro, for me, is not something that is an aside. It is an essential of the struggle. The people in Montgomery were able to struggle and get integration on their buses for a simple reason. 10 years before, they could not have done it because they did not believe in themselves. When they believed in themselves, they could then be socially affectionate to the opposition, while at the same time being extremely militant and walking and being prepared to sacrifice. I think this is most important. And I would therefore agree with Malcolm X that doing away with the ugliness which our people have had as a result of their poverty and their position is very necessary and important. We can certainly agree here.
Thank you. And you know, I was so happy, Mr. Rustin, to hear you say that dignity is most important. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad absolutely, he emphasizes to us the importance of dignity, but you cannot have dignity. Dignity means a high regard for yourself.
Right.
You can't have high regard for that which you have no knowledge of. And when you ask a white man his nationality, for instance, and he says German, immediately he's connected with a German nation, a German flag in the past, a German culture. If he says He's an Englishman. He's connected with England, and he's connected with a culture. Now, if you ask a black man in America and he says Negro, right there, he's putting a term on himself that carries more contempt with it than any word that exists in the Webster's dictionary today. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the black man in America is not looked down upon because he's black. He's looked down upon because he's called a Negro. A black man can come here from Africa. He's not a Negro. He's an African. He has a culture. A black man from Africa can put on his long flowing robes and have his head wrapped up and walk around in Alabama or Mississippi and not run into the same abuses and barriers and pitfalls that you and I would run into here in America, dressed like a white man, speaking like a white man, with the religion of the white man, and with the false conception of history that the white man has brainwashed us with, and at the same time calling ourselves by the white man's name. Now,
okay, I want to stop right there and comment on it, because they do respect Africa. It's not, I mean, we keep thinking that it's just about black. No, it's not just being black. It's because you're a Negro. It's because you're born in America, because you're under their system. You are a second-class citizen. You don't have sovereignty. They don't respect you because you are dependent on them. They respect the sovereign Africans who came here because they have sovereignty. And I can say personally, because I look African, even by these immigrants, even Africans think I'm African. So I get the respect that, I mean, not always. When people know I'm American, I get treated just like everybody else. But first off, when they see me, they think that I'm African. They don't treat me the same way that they treat a so-called Negro in America. So there is more respect for Africans than there is for Black Americans. They think that Africans work harder. And this is the whole issue that we're having with the so-called, with reparations. And we're talking about, it should be about Pan-Africanism versus just Americans in America who are born here. I mean, I don't know. There's some kind of resentment going on because Africans do get more respect than Black Americans. They just do. I mean, I don't know what you can do with that. Okay, I do know. I mean, here's the thing. Malcolm X has told you, you need to leverage that. You're not going to get any respect as a subject because you don't have sovereignty. They don't give a shit about what you have to say. They're not going to give you reparations. They're not going to give you anything. You need to leverage your Pan-Africanism, go to those African nations and get them to put pressure on the American government. Why would they do it? Because they have already established trade. They're dependent on those African nations for natural resources. They want to go in there and build their corporations, and they're not going to be able to do that without their support. So you have no leverage as an American Negro. You need to go to those African nations and get them to do it. And stop this whole bickering about, oh, you're not an American Black person, you're African. That's bullshit, right? Maybe they're not entitled to reparations, but I don't think the conversation should be about reparations anyway. It should be about sovereignty.
Mr. Muhammad says is this: instead of us spending all of our time griping with the white man for the way he has treated us or for what he deprives us of, what we must do is get some dignity, which we cannot have without having a knowledge of ourselves. We must have some kind of cultural knowledge in our background in order for, we must know what our parents did and what our foreparents did in order to have high regard for our foreparents. And if you don't have an high regard for your foreparents, you can't regard yourself highly. You take a man who has been taught that his father used to pull a plow and his mother was a maid for the master.
I agree with you, but I don't think nationalism is the same as statism. You can have a nation without a state. A nation is a voluntary association, and right, it's not a voluntary. It's not a coercive association. So I don't think that the two are mutual. Well, I don't think that you have to have a state in order to have a nation. You don't. So we've already had nations, right? A nation is anything you want it to be. You don't have this. The problem is the state. So as long as Pan-Africanism is not advocating for statism, then I don't really see a problem with it. But I mean, I guess that's something that we can debate. But I don't have a problem with nationalism.
He can't look up at his parents. But when you send him back beyond the time that his father was pulling a plow, and back beyond the time when his mother was a maid for the white man, back to the time when he was living along the banks of the Nile in palaces, at the same time the white man was living in the caves of Europe, and history will bear that out, or at a time when he was wearing silk in the East and in Africa and Asia, at a time when the white man, whom he regards so highly today, didn't know what clothes were, at a time when he was cooking and seasoning his food, when at the same time the white man, whom he idolizes and worships today, didn't know what cooked food was, then when you go back then and find out what a great history that the black man had, how his foreparents were the ones who engineered the pyramids, and how that the head or the face on the Sphinx in Africa, which is one of the oldest statues on this earth, is not a European, but it's a black man. He begins to look back there and see that his people were somebody. He begins immediately to throw off this inferior attitude, and he begins to look up at himself. And then he stops abusing himself. He stops getting drunk. He stops trying to escape from the surroundings or the conditions that he's in by turning to dope or alcohol.
Well,
he
look,
begins to
I
toss
agree
aside
with
these
this.
abuses.
I agree thoroughly. And I am at the present time doing some work on the Ga Empire.
But,
Precisely
sir,
because I think this is important.
it's very important.
But now let me ask you another question, because I want to clarify your position on the Jewish question. Where does your group come out on this question? Because I only tell you what I don't want to tell you what I've heard. I want
Tell
to see
me
what
anything you've heard and I'll clarify it.
Well, I have been given to understand that your position is, particularly in Harlem, that the Jews dominate, that one of the reasons that the Negro is so depressed is that the Jews are exploiting him, and that the Jews are attempting to exploit the Arab world and stir up difficulties in the Middle East. Now, I'd like to know whether this is a misunderstanding I have.
I should say that we only have a few minutes more.
Yes, sir. If you, sir, will read what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has written, and he has written much, I don't think you can find an article where he has ever pointed out the Jew as an exploiter of the black man. He speaks of the exploiter, period. He doesn't break it down in terms of a Frenchman or an Englishman or a Jew or a German. He speaks of the exploiter. And sometimes the man who is the most guilty of exploitation will think that you're pointing the finger at him and put out the propaganda that you're anti-this or that you're anti-that. We make no distinction between exploitation and exploiter.
Now, what do you mean when you say the man who is the most exploiting will put out propaganda?
I say this, that usually when you find a man putting out propaganda against Muslims, usually that man feels that the finger is being pointed at him. But
in other words, you think that many Jews feel that way?
I don't know.
I'm not sure how this is going over his head, but Malcolm X is actually talking about Bayard Rustin. So it's almost as if Malcolm X is calling him a coon to his face, but he doesn't even realize what Malcolm X has said, because it is Bayard Rustin who's sitting there pushing propaganda against the Nation of Islam.
But I say that you cannot find anything that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has written or said that at any time will label the Jew as an exploiter. No, sir, but he speaks about the exploitation and the oppression and the deception that has been used against the black people of America. Now, the man that is guilty, let whoever is guilty wear that shoe. But he has never made a distinction between a Frenchman, again I say, or a Jew, or a German, or what have you. The exploiter is the exploiter. I don't care what kind of label you put on him, and he can't duck it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bayard Rustin and Mr. Malcolm X.
Thank you, Mr. Donald.
It's been very good to be here. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So that's the end of that discussion. Like I said, I'm probably not going to do as much content just because I don't have as much time, but I'm going to try to do more impactful content. So when I do get up here, it's not going to be bullshit. It's going to be stuff that I think is more substantive, and hopefully I'll grow my channel that way. Less is more. And y'all have any suggestions on content I should do, then you can email me or post something in the comment section, and y'all can kind of tell me what y'all. I need to really talk about Black anarchy, because a lot of people don't know that there's a whole history behind it. They think that that anarchy is just for the dominant society, and it's not. So thank y'all so much for everybody who came here today. Be sure to post comments and let me know what you think, and I'll be doing more content in the future.